Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of College Football UK, brought to you by the Sleep at Work Network. I am your host, Fletch, and I am joined this week by two stunning co-hosts, as ever, in Gary and Sam. Gentlemen, the Olympics opening ceremony is happening most of the way through as we're starting this episode. Premier League football and English football is around the corner. Then straight after the Olympics, and once this season's underway, college football, and the game in Dublin is only 4 weeks away now. Gentlemen, well, in fact, including that, NFL teams are in training camp, and multiple college football teams have started some level of training over the last few days. Sport is right around the corner. How are we feeling?
Sports is sporting again, aren't they? It's great when it suddenly rushes, because we go through that period of it feels like there's nothing. That off season seems to drag, and there's no sport, and nothing to watch, and nothing. And now, as you say, suddenly it's like, well, we've now got like 4 weeks of Olympic stuff to keep us going. Then we've got college season starts, NFL training camps are coming in. All the news is starting to come through. Hopefully, people are still awake after watching the opening ceremony, which wasn't that enthralling from what I'm gathering. So hopefully, if you are still awake, come and listen to us. We'll get the juices flowing.
Indeed. It was an interesting one. But hopefully, by the time I'm watching this, it's fully underway. We'll have had at least one full day of Olympic sports, etc., etc. It's a very, very exciting time. I do apologise. Sam is having a couple of slight little technical difficulties to start this episode, but we will get properly rolling with Sam any moment now. Gary, while we just wait for Sam to get back, 4 weeks until the college football game in Ireland between Florida State, your Florida State, and Georgia Tech. How excited are you?
Cannot wait. So excited now. Like it's the countdown. It was one of those things, you book tickets so early, when you find out as soon as you get the first time pre-sale. I was in booking the tickets, but I forgot. It felt like ages away, and now it's just like it's 4 weeks. It's less than 30 days. It's just literally around the corner, and with all the news and all the added bits that are starting to trickle out, it looks like it's just going to be an amazing day.
Well, on that note, though, I will be there, you will be there, Nick will be there. I've already had multiple conversations with a couple of my friends throughout this community. You can believe it or not, I have friends and people. Some people like me because they haven't got to know me yet. So, had a couple of conversations with these people, just people who are going to the game, very excited to meet up and see each other. If you are a fan of this show and you would like, we will be in the area. Please come over and say hello,
we'll
Gary,
be carrying
Nick, and I.
stupid signs, and we'll be probably promoting College Football UK on a podcast with a big sign behind Pat McAfee's head, potentially.
Yes. Well, I will be wearing a bright maize M. I don't know about you. I don't think you'll be wearing a bright maize M, to be honest with you, Gary. I don't think that's your style.
Not really.
Well, I will be wearing a bright maize M.
I may well be wearing. I'm probably going to go with my teal Florida State shirt, probably. But I do have Florida State sweater. I have a range of options, shall we say, things to wear. To be determined what I'll be wearing, but it will be predominantly garnet, shall we say.
Yes. One of the interesting things about this is actually a conversation I had. In fact, while I've got everybody and while I'm on this topic and while we're still waiting on Sam, excuse me, I had a mess up with Fanatics over the last week or so, in which I have managed to somehow wangle myself a free hoodie, with a medium Michigan hoodie. We are doing a giveaway across the Sleep at Work Network social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Head over. You need to do a little retweet and a share. Give us a follow, and you could be in with a chance. You've got to be UK based as well, because it's a free hoodie, but I ain't paying for that shipping.
Postage is mad.
It's crazy, but feel free to enter that. We have a hoodie being given away.
It is a Michigan hoodie, just so just make sure everybody's aware. It's a medium Michigan hoodie. So if you want it, get involved. If you don't, I don't blame you.
But okay, so hopefully this is the end of all the troubles. But most importantly, right now, probably not the best time to ask you, Sam. How are you?
Frustrated with technology. It's meant to work and it's not working. But other than that, I'm pretty good.
Yeah. Have you had a good week, though? At least.
Yeah, just fairly standard, to be honest. Thankfully, work's ticking along as it always is, and yeah, just spending most of my time looking at different things on the NFL coming through. Apart from a few hiccups of late with players and fantasy that I've lost and already.
Well, speaking of the NFL coming back and all of that sort of stuff, we'll get on to a little bit of the latest news in college football. I've got a couple of bits. Nick's not with us this week, so we don't have our usual news collating person. So we've had to do it all ourselves this week, which is just disgraceful.
We're so good at homework.
Yeah, we are so good at it. Starting with Utah State cornerback, former Michigan cornerback Andre Selden Jr. died on last Saturday in a drowning in Utah, which is a very, very unfortunate situation, a very sad situation, and obviously the thoughts of the network with his friends and family at this moment in time, well, it must be very difficult. However, in other news, Netflix announced that they will be continuing it. It's Undisputed, isn't it? Is it the Undisputed series, their sports? Or is it Untold?
Untold.
Untold.
The untold stories.
Netflix have announced the latest few installments of their Untold documentary series, which will feature, fun for me this one, I can't wait to watch this, a sign stealer documentary featuring Michigan's Connor Stallions, who was, if you know anything about it, then you'll know who Connor Stallions is. If you are not fully familiar, Connor Stallions is often looked at as the main person behind the sign stealing. He considers himself to have acted alone in it. Whether people agree or not is one thing. Very interested to hear his side of it.
It will be interesting to see him and delve into that and hear maybe full story, but whether or not we get the full story, it will be interesting to look at
that. Can't wait for it. I really can't, obviously. In other news, Georgia wide receiver Rara Thomas was arrested on battery charges this week. It's been announced that Ohio State players collectively made $20 million each in NIL, which, if you look at an 80-man roster-ish, you break that as $250,000 on average. Now, not every player will be making $250,000, but some will be making a fair bit more than $250,000. And finally, in other NIL news, from my side anyway, Florida's Billy Napier and two other co-defendants have asked the court to drop Jaden Rashada's NIL lawsuit. Gentlemen, have either of you managed to pick up on anything else this week?
Just the trickles of excitement, as you mentioned, about college football coming back, and the fact that Dublin Game Day 0 will have the full game, ESPN Game Day squad turning up, including Nick Saban's first jaunt out in front of the cameras after, going into retirement. He's coming. Nick Saban will be there. Pat McAfee will be there. The whole kit and caboodle is going to happen in Dublin. Dublin is going to rock for 4 weeks' time. So I've been happy to see that coming out, because that does add a little added incentive to that Game Day 0 and the international game in Dublin.
Yeah. As mentioned slightly earlier while we were waiting on certain things to work, unfortunately, Sam, you can't make it to be with us, can you, for the Dublin game?
No, I can't. When is it again? Remind me on with the date.
24th
of August.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have something on that weekend. I think that's why I didn't try and book tickets.
No problem. Well, the question is now, do you have a life-size cardboard cutout of yourself? If you don't, can we make one and bring it along with us?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
Absolutely
Sam,
fine. I'm
so
sure
Sam will be there.
I'm sure Ryanair have no problems with us squeezing that on.
Absolutely no problem. So
They'll
hopefully
charge us
we'll
for
all
a
be
whole
there.
ticket, obviously.
That's fine. To have Sam there in some shape or form, worth the money. I'm
Definitely.
sure.
I think we might just have to get a picture and put it on the sign so that we're there behind Pat McAfee's head at ESPN Game Day and have a big giant Sam head. Sounds like the perfect plan.
On the NIL side of things, so I know we spoke off camera a little bit about the NIL side of things. A couple of things were mentioned, about kind of, the future of NIL and how up in the air and crazy a lot of things are. Sam, I guess with a lawsuit currently in place over NIL deals, with so much money being made, or the most being made so far being 20 million collectively by a roster. What do you think about everything that's kind of going on at the moment around NIL?
To be honest, I just think it's. I suppose with it being so new, well, saying not new in terms of the actual process, but just new in terms of what it is at the time now. I think it's going to be quite. There could be real issues with it, and I think that's going to start creeping in, especially when we've seen obviously already that there are certain people who are already taking up lawsuits, and I just think that it could be without the right regulations in place, and the fact that we don't have those regulations in place, I think we are probably going to see an increase in nil lawsuits in the next year or so.
I think there's a Wild West aspect at the moment to it. It's the floodgates are open, if you like, now that it's allowed to happen. Whereas, as we discussed before, it always happened in the past. It was just done a little more, underhand, shading, a little bit like backdoor. Now it's at front and center. I just think everyone's just going all guns blazing for it, and it's not structured, it's not regulated, so it's inevitable you're going to get a player who'll turn up and go to a college because they've said, "Hey, come over and we'll give you $3.5 million to come play for us as an NIL deal," and then they transfer out in the spring and they take the money with them because there's no regulations to say that's not allowed. They turned up, they played half a season, or they signed for that college and then transferred out. The NIL deals aren't probably structured well enough to state, your NIL deal covers you to come and play for this college team for the minimum of one season or whatever. It's not. It's probably not even got that sort of structure on it. So you will get, and I don't want to say you will get some unscrupulous players taking advantage of it, but you will also get the savvy ones who are like, why would you not sign for a college at the end of the season to play the next season, get given $4 million, for example, but then in the spring, if you have an opening, to go and get another $2 million by signing another NIL deal at a different college with no comeback, if you like, why wouldn't you do that, right? Why would you not make $6 million in NIL deals for not doing anything because they want to give you the money? It's lawless at the moment, and I think, unfortunately, until it gets regulated, we will be expecting more stories of coaches suing players or colleges suing players or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think, like you say, the thing at the moment is everything's being kind of left for people to do how they see the right way to do it. And let's face it, if there's one thing we know, that two people are on two very different sides of this coin, and both of them will not see eye to eye
Both
as
of them
far
will
as this
feel they're
conversation
right,
will go. And then you will find that there are other participants in this conversation who are not equal in this conversation. It's a very, like you say, it's very, very wild west. And like you say, regulation is going to be very important going forward. Now, I think the question
Who
is,
does that? That an
for
NCAA
most
thing?
of us, is how long is that going to take?
Would that fall
Yeah.
under the NCAA,
Is
or
that
will
going
it
to
have
have
to
to
be
be?
a whole new NIL regulator spun up?
Is it going to have to go down to each individual conference to dictate how how schools within their conference can act? Would then, as we've seen, state attorneys or state-based individuals get involved and say, actually, do
State
you know what,
governors and stuff,
SEC, you say that only this can happen, but actually via our state's rules and regulations, you don't have the power to tell our this business what to or what not to do in this sense. And it's going to get very, very messy. And I would say that things like, not to bring this back up again or continue this conversation, but is this where the Super League conversation comes back? Where teams of a certain level would have to go and create their own rules and regulations, but it would have to somewhat be regulated, because an NCAA cannot afford everything's just too different on both sides of the spectrum, and you're going to upset a lot of people.
They need to make sure that when they when they review it, that they bring in strict rules, especially around. I do think there needs to be rules around, the idea that if you're being offered a nil contract to join a certain team and then you just take that and then bugger off with it, I think that things like that need to be stopped. I do think there needs to be, again, bringing back to the idea of it being college, there needs to be those educational limitations within it as well, like we've started seeing with the trades as well, with the fact that you have to have certain educational things in place before you can actually start doing stuff. So
your GPA must be at a certain point for you to earn X. Is that what you're kind of looking at?
Yeah. So I just think that they need to have some more things in place before they start. Because the thing is, like you say, the floodgates have opened, so these big deals are already starting to come out. They're only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger the more the players come through. So they need to start looking at it now, and they need to address it now before we start seeing, more of these $13 million lawsuits that are being thrown out. Because it will only get worse, and you'll start seeing players probably using their nil as threats to leave people to try and make more money as well.
Yeah,
like we see in the NFL, they use their contract situation, or they use people. They'll say, like, I don't know, well, Shadur Sanders is getting 20 million in nil. I think I'm going to be just as good as him. I want 22 million nil guaranteed before I even consider joining you. And that's where it's going to get at. And then you're going to start seeing, I think this is where you start getting the problems around, big egos. And, we go to those sort of, it could go the extreme way of not superheroes, but supervillains.
Society always finds a way to overcorrect itself a lot. We find this all over, and I think we're in one of those overcorrection periods where the balance was tilted that way for a long time towards a certain aspect of in favour of a certain part of this. Now it's going a bit more it's going all that way over. And what we want it to be nicely in the middle. We want it to work for the athletes. We want it to work for the colleges, but we also want it to work for all of, like, whether you're in D1, 2, or 3, whether you're in the FBS or FCS, whether you are in the group of 6 now, and whether you're in the Power 4. This needs to work for everybody, and this overcorrection, it didn't work before this all the way over here, it didn't work all the way over there, it doesn't work all the way over there. There needs to be a middle ground somewhere. We're going to flip it this week and do the SEC first, and then we'll talk some Big 12 and go about it that way. But first, and Gary thought we got away with it this week, and Gary, my friend, you're not getting away with it. It just doesn't happen when I'm here. We're going to get to a little trivia question for you both. Now, not that long ago, I asked you both who had the longest winning streak in FBS history. And again, we're
Playoff
talking
winning streak.
FBS only. Which FBS school had the longest losing streak
Oh.
in football history? And again,
Are we
much
talking
like that question,
talking regular season games, or are we talking bowl game? It's an interesting one now.
it would be regular season. I don't think they would have made a bowl game in that time.
No, by the sound of it,
With
no.
such a
If they've lost 26 games on the trot or whatever, yeah.
given when the losing streak started as well, they definitely did not make a bowl game within that time. So obviously we want to come up with the college. The primary thing is to just come up with the school. But if you want to have a crack as well at how many games and roughly what time period this was, then feel free.
You're tempted to go
Just
your Akron
because-
Zips just because, been mentioning them
I'm
a
gonna-
couple of times.
I'm going to go with Texas because of the fact that you used Florida last time, just to see if you're going to try and trick us up again.
Can't see it's going to be.
Can I give you a little, well, it's not a clue for this one. When doing a lot of these and a lot of the kind of the stats and facts and records that come up, do you know how sick I am of seeing all the really good ones? And Florida State seems to be there or thereabouts as the answer for almost all of them. Sickening. And then you got the really obvious ones like Michigan winning the most individual games of all time and things like that like
Yeah.
it doesn't challenge you enough. So
It's not Texas.
it's not
I think
Texas.
It's not Texas.
That's good.
And it's not Florida State either, by the way. I'll give you that one for free as well.
And it's also probably not the Fighting Irish, even though Nick's not with us.
It is not the Fighting Irish. In fact, none of us none of us within our group, etc., support a team. This team.
Gators.
It is not the Gators.
Is it a SEC team?
It isn't an SEC team.
Now, is it? It's an FBS team.
It is FBS.
It's going to be somebody like Rutgers. Some rubbish, isn't it? Just
Navy.
trying to, yeah, I was thinking Navy, Army, maybe, or something. In fact, Air Force, probably. Oh,
I mean, it could be
Stanford.
Not Stanford.
This is one of those ones. It could have been like, back in the day, Yale, like from 1904 to 1918, didn't win a game or something like that. I have a feeling it's really, really old like that.
Kansas State?
No. And again, in terms of kind of longevity, calendar-wise, I don't think it would be the longest, like, calendar-wise. However, we're talking simply in the case of losing streak of games in lost one, lost two, consecutive games, yeah.
Which is potentially our whole season and a bit.
And I'll give you another clue. They are within the now Power 4. So you don't need to go into the Group of 5 or the MAC, the Mountain West, etc.
They are now in the...
They are now, as and
means they
when...
maybe weren't before.
Maybe thinking Washington or someone like that.
Clemson.
It is not, and they have always been.
Oregon?
No,
No.
it wouldn't be Oregon. It would be somebody in the. Would it be the Kennesaw State out?
No. So the conference that they are in now, they have been in it officially since the 1890s. So they haven't changed conference in
so
quite a while.
It's established.
One of the originals, then.
Yeah, they have a long history in the game.
UCLA? They've moved around.
Is it the
I'm sure
Raging
that-
Cajuns?
It is not the Raging Cajuns, unfortunately.
That would be a good one. Purdue?
However, 1 week. I mean, depending on how we do the regular the season, I doubt we'll have this. But for the off season, I think it's a lovely little thing to do. I will find a random Raging Cajun stat just to throw out there one day as an answer for you.
Illinois. Fighting Illinois.
No, but one more clue. It is a rival of Illinois. They have a specific rivalry with Illinois.
Illinois State.
Nope.
Illinois and, was it Iowa?
Chicago? No.
Iowa, isn't it? Illinois and Iowa. Yeah. Iowa State. Indiana.
It is not. They will play the rival game against Illinois. In the last week of the regular season.
Oh, Northwestern.
It is Northwestern.
Northwestern Wildcats, yeah.
So, got there in the end. Northwestern have the
Roundabout
longest
way we got there,
losing streak in FBS history that spanned 34 games consecutive losses. It went from the 22nd of September 1979, and with it being so in September, I could tell you that season they did not make a bowl game.
Yeah.
That's a lot of losses to the end of the season, too many to make a bowl game, and lasted until the 18th of September 1982, and only one of those games was even a one-score game.
Was even close, yeah.
33 of those were two-score or more games.
Oh. There you go.
Not pretty.
Not pretty, but stuck with it. But I suppose, when it was the Big 10 or whenever it would have been Big 8 back then, wasn't it? I suppose they were always there's always been whipping boys of these conferences. So they're in there because they're academics, or they're in there because of geographics, or they're in there because they might be absolutely stinkingly rubbish at football, but they've got a really good basketball program or a really good XYZ, which so that's how they're in the conference. But yeah, there's always a whipping boy. I just think they're less. I think the gap between all teams now is getting smaller as this realignment and conference get bigger and whatever else. There'll still be teams which are going to get absolutely tonked, but I think that within the divisions there's less. Sorry, within the conferences there's less. Two sets. Teams at the top, teams at the bottom. I think there's any team, any given Saturday type thing can turn another team over. So I don't think you'll ever get that run. He says. But, that's 3 years of not winning. Oh. That's like somebody's whole college career.
Yeah. Let me go back to it over here. Before we move on.
79 to 82, so
yeah, September 79 to September 82.
So
3 years.
Long time, isn't it?
Somebody's
3 years.
full college career of not ever winning a game of football. You can't imagine too many got drafted.
Well, given that it was 4 days less than 3 years, if they'd have lost that one more game, that would have been over 3 years. That would have been that they would have gone without the win.
Imagine the party that must have happened when they actually broke that.
Similar to when San Marino scored a goal.
Yeah. Yep. The day San Marino win a game, it'll be...
get a point against me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, just one tiny little fun thing. So every one of these facts, because it came up against that little thing a couple of weeks ago where it was, I think one site said this, one site said that. The fact that the record would be held, but it just depends on who was giving it. I did look up and I tried to verify on a couple of places that the stat exists, and it is with who we say the stat is win. So I went in and I even did Wikipedia, like the longest losing streaks, and San Marino was in that Wikipedia article because they went across multiple sports, including football, and San Marino was right up there as one of the teams. With that in mind, let's talk some SEC football. And SEC football is a brand new conversation for us right now. And you know what else is brand new for the SEC this year? The Texas Longhorns.
Texas Longhorns, and who else did they join?
So we shall go and throw this straight to Sam, our resident Texas Longhorn himself, and say, what are your initial thoughts on the SEC this year, sir?
I think it is the hardest division to predict this year, personally. I think there are so many ridiculously good teams in there that it's just going to be a case of who loses out, rather than who wins out. I think it's going to go down to what we were saying before, where it could be that on the day, just whoever turns up, whoever wants it more, wins the division. I think it's just so difficult. I was trying to go through them. I think I've changed my predictions about 5 times of where I think teams are going to finish.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a difficult one, but it's going to be exciting.
It's a massive. I think it's safe to say that the SEC is the premier conference of all of them, competitive wise, and now that with the additions that they've got, I know there's which one's the best, whatever else, but I think the SEC is head and shoulders above a lot of other conferences with the competitiveness of the teams they've got. You can look at that. You can run down the list and you can go top 8. There's at least 8 teams that are battling for the title. Can't say that in any other conference you can look at, and you think there's 8 teams that could win that. And that's at a very broad stroke, and that's still not doing too much of a disservice to the others. But it's insane that there's potentially 8 teams battling for the title of one conference, and they all got to play each other, and there's all sorts of rivalries, and what the SEC have done and who they've added, the rivalries and the passion that they have brought together. And as you say, Texas now joining the SEC, you got Texas A&M. Hey, they also brought Oklahoma along as well. So that's a triumvirate of rivalry games that they've just literally got. It's just going to be box office games after box office games in that conference.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 9 teams who'll finish with 8 and 4 or above.
Yeah, it's mental.
Or could finish 8-4 or above. It's crazy.
Out of 16 teams, I'll go run a couple of stats. The projected win totals from where I've collated this information from. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 4, because of how many games are in a season. 4 teams are predicted to have a sub 500 record. 4.
So I'm going to guess
out of
that
16.
12 teams would have a winning record in that conference.
So
12
at least a 7
teams
and
going to a
7
bowl
and
game.
6 or 6-5 or whatever.
I'm going to guess the ones you have I can go on the sheet, but I'm guessing that Vanderbilt is probably one of them.
Yes,
Vanderbilt,
it is.
probably Mississippi State.
Arkansas.
Arkansas. Florida.
Yeah.
Mississippi.
Florida
and Vanderbilt.
Florida have a bitch of a schedule. I think I've read they've got like one of the hardest, if not the hardest schedule this year.
That isn't my win total, by the way.
Such a shame.
So I haven't gone through and predicted my wins for They're the projected win totals. I've gone with gone over a couple. I've put bloody work in here, boys. I'm telling you. I've gone over to a couple of different. I've gone from CBS to BetMGM to not Bet365. They don't cover that over here as nearly as detailed. But a couple of the other betting forums and kind of come up with an aggregated average. Most of them have the same within 0.5 or 1, and kind of come up with the general averages. So between 3 or 4 sources, that is the average I'm getting. So 4 teams would be. But let's have a look at Florida here. So they've got
They've just got the meanest schedule. It's just like
Miami
somebody
at
in
home.
the NCAA do not like the Gators. It's horrible.
No. Well, I've actually done it as well with this sheet as well. I've actually done a little bit of something nice. I tried to bolden all in-conference games as well, so we know which one's actually going to count for in-conference. Miami at home, Sanford at home, Texas A&M at home, at Mississippi State, then a bye week, UCF at home, at Tennessee, Kentucky at home, bye week, Georgia.
Those last 5 games.
The last 5 games stink, don't they? They stink.
Georgia, I believe that is like meant to be a neutral game.
Isn't that going to be
the
like
Georgia
one of those?
one?
Yeah.
At Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, then at Florida State.
That's 5 losses there, really.
That's 5. I'm counting everything. Maybe Stanford, maybe Mississippi State. Did you say? I think they've got. And then who was the other? I think I can count maybe 3 wins. I think maybe. Can't see much. Yeah, it's a toughie. It's a real hard schedule, isn't it?
And as far as Kentucky goes, I mean, Kentucky are predicted to have one of the teams that are really projected with a winning season. They're the only team I had as a roundabout. They're the ones at 6 point. They're at 6.5, so they could have a winning season. Couldn't the 0.5 is around about that. But that to have a winning record, or even be projected to have a winning record in the SEC, is no small feat. That is not you can't be a bad team and have that. So that's not going to be an easy game against Kentucky either. Tennessee, I had them projected. I mean, on a personal projection at 10 wins, and I got my aggregate of 9.5 for Tennessee as well. So that's a horrible game for them. So realistically, 7 out of the last 8 weeks, the only one they might not lose is the bye week.
Yeah, and even then,
you never know.
You never know with the bye week injury happen. It's just brutal. It literally is brutal. It's either they've done something to upset somebody, or what it is. But yeah, that is harsh. And I think they've been on the back end of a couple of losing seasons already. So I'm assuming, they've got to be hoping that next year they get an easier schedule, because it's almost like, hey, you've lost the last 2 seasons, you've had a losing schedule, so here's another one that's really going to test your fans, test your mettle.
It's never going to get any easier with the way that the SEC is now formed. So
I think it's their
out
of conference games as well, isn't it? The out of conference games aren't walkovers, whereas some other teams have got properly, the out of conference games have been literally set up as a whipping ground type thing, but they've got 2 interstate rivalry games as their non-conference games, which, I mean, fair play for taking them. If they've 3 of them, is there 3 interstate?
Oh wait, no, yeah. Miami, so UCF as well.
Of course,
UCF,
University of Central Florida. Yeah. So tough.
And we speak about, again, this is a common thing in sport. It doesn't matter necessarily how good or bad your opponent is. If it's a rival, they turn up.
Yeah.
So it's easy to say about a UCF, the whole, they're not as good, they're not in that conversation. Who cares? It's UCF. They're going to turn up to play Florida. That's going to happen. End of story.
You're gonna bring some heat. That is essentially the game of the year for that team.
Mm-hmm.
And the Florida, opening against Miami, who look like, as we mentioned, look a good team, and we expect them to be at the top end of that sort of conference. That's a tough opening, and then to end against the Florida Seminoles, who are going to probably be pushing for a title bid. And, I want to feel sorry for the Gators, but I can't. But if there was ever a way of getting another Florida fan to feel sorry for another Florida team, the NCAA and the SEC have done it this year with giving Florida. That's just hideous. I'm going to watch it because it's going to be fun to watch the car crash, but it's just harsh.
Billy Napier is currently listed as one of the top, and I think we might have somewhat mentioned it previously. Billy Napier is on a hot seat at the moment after a couple of losing seasons at Florida, and this could be a third losing season in a row. With that being said, right, so in my opinion, you've got three things, and to kind of pluck back, the whole we'll talk about it later. Well, I'm going to do that in reverse. I'm going to take something from previously. I'm going to take something previously and bring it forward, bring it back. 2 losing seasons, potentially a third losing season. And right now, while Florida State are currently in a legal battle off the field through other various different things, you as the Florida Gators are now in a legal battle with Billy Napier at the heart of it. And whether you want to say that whether Billy Napier was in the right or wrong with that, that's not what we're here to discuss at this moment in time. But there's legal trouble, and his name's at the centre of it. And you're about to have a third losing season. Do you then turn around and go, it's okay, because you had a really, really, really tough schedule this year. We didn't necessarily expect you to have a winning season, or with all of that piling on, will Billy Napier be looking for a job in January?
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because you've got to think that schedule gives him a pass. Maybe. But
I doubt
with all the other,
it's not. It
with
won't
all
give
the
him a
other
pass.
noise and everything else, I suppose it depends on how badly you want to say they turn up against some of those rival teams. If they turn up against Miami and get absolutely railroaded, 50 points, and the same against Florida State, then you've probably got to be looking at it going, even if it's a tough schedule, you've got to, we can't wander up against those teams and get absolutely hammered. I think that's the thing. I suppose it will depend on if and how many close games there are. But if they A, got a tough schedule, B, end up on a third losing season, but C, more importantly, the team just doesn't turn up, that's going to be it. I think that'll be the final nail, because then they'll use the lawsuit and all the excessive noise has been distracting as an excuse to show him the door. But I think that's the only saving grace I would suggest, that if you can keep some of those games close and there may only be one score or 10 points or whatever, I think that's his only potential of not being shown the door.
That's fair. And look, without, at the end of the day, this is the SEC. This isn't the Florida Conference. So I think other teams that we talk about, it's a very interesting conversation to have, though, and one that, however you want to have it, that will be a storyline this season, and people will be watching just how hot that seat gets under Billy Napier throughout the year. And unfortunately, I'd like to let everybody know who's listening who is a Florida fan. Gary is an interstate rival. He's probably gonna love it. Sam is an interconference rival. He'll probably love watching it. I have no dog in this fight. I'm rooting for you. I hope you have a lovely year. So someone's got your back here, even if it's just me, even if I'm just looking for more friends. Anyway, are there any other teams? I mean, okay, let's start from this question. Is it Georgia's overall to lose right now? I know you say there are a lot of teams that could win it, but is it Georgia's to lose?
No.
You're going to say that. Sam's going to say no.
Yeah,
Sam's
I'm
going
going
to
to say
put his
no.
Sam's going to put his rust-coloured glasses on, or whatever it is. Whatever the colour.
Burnt orange.
Burnt orange. Is it burnt orange? Not yeah, maize yellow, burnt orange, garnet. There we go. Yeah. Close that loop off. I think it is. I think it has to go through Athens. If you want to take that, if you want to win the SEC, you're going to have to knock Georgia apart. And they have got a lot of players coming back. They've probably got the best QB in this year's college football landscape coming back. I think it's a tough ask. The issue is, I think you might be able to get at the defense of Georgia, but I think you're going to have to, because their offense is going to roll over lots of teams. So I think you're going to either have to go toe to toe with them and hope that you can score one more than them, type Newcastle, a la under Kevin Keegan type thing, because I don't see anybody stopping that offense and that offensive line of Carson Beck sitting there just taking his passes as much as possible. So I do see it being Georgia's to lose, caveated with I can also see a couple of teams going in and doing the damage, because there are some really good teams there as well.
It's been spoken about a few times. There's a trifecta in college: a returning QB, a returning OC, and a returning head coach is a very, very good position to be in. Georgia are in that position.
Yeah. Continuity is key in college football, and they have that, as you say. Their QB's come back. He could have gone into the draft last year, but I think he sensibly went. He wanted to come back. He wanted to get it. The O line they've got is just pro level. So that's the thing. As I say, the defense is the only concern. He says concern, but I'd love to be in a position to have the concern that Georgia have of, there's a few new starters at linebacker and safety and whatever else. Oh no, but they're all blue chip 4 or 5 star recruits anyway, so it's not like a drop off. But that's the only bit I can see. That's potentially the only weakness. It's one of the most well-rounded teams.
Yeah. Georgia, who came second in the championship last season, came second to Alabama. Alabama, everybody expects not a major drop off, but they expect a drop off from Alabama. So, if you can consider kind of out of those two championship teams last season, Georgia are the real contender. There's a championship winning team. We've already spoke about a new team coming in. 2 of them were in the championship game last year for another conference, and one of them won it. And I would believe, Sam, that might be the team. If it's not Georgia's to lose, it might be Texas's to lose. Could they go back to back? Could they do 2 seasons, 2 championships in 2 different conferences? How likely is that for you?
I think it's quite likely. I think what we did in the transfer portal and what we've done to retain the players like Ewers, who I know obviously everyone goes on about Arch Manning being the next great quarterback, but Ewers has done absolute wonders at this team. I mean, I've picked out a few players in terms of for the whole SEC division conference, but one player that I'm seeing we're on the topic of Texas that I really am looking forward to watching is Trey Moore, which is the edge rusher for Texas, and bringing him in during the portal was an absolute steal. And I think he could be really integral to how well we do. Obviously, you've got the likes of, is it Barker or Baxter, the running back? I always forget mix his name up. Bringing in, obviously, Isaiah Bond. You've got other sort of good wide receivers in that core. And I think we brought in did we bring in a tight end as well? Nisbet. We've got him as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's by no means it's going to be easy. I think that's probably you look at that Georgia game is going to be really interesting because we've got to play the Sooners the week before.
It's going to be beaten up
So
from Iraq.
that's going to be a difficult stretch. I mean, luckily we then have Vanderbilt after Georgia, so they're sort of our 3 games in between the 2 bye weeks, and then after the bye weeks you've got Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. So I mean, if we can get through that Oklahoma Georgia block, I think we'll be fine. I mean, that obviously Colorado I think we'll be fine against. Michigan will beat them, but it's not going. The only reason is because of their drop off.
Yeah.
No, I agree. That's fair.
UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State. I mean, don't even need to say anything about those 3 teams. It's Oklahoma and the Georgia game after the bye week that's going to really be the testing part, and then depending on where we're at, the Texas A&M rivalry game at the end of the year or at the end of the season could be defining that game in terms of whether we're potentially, 9-3, 10-2, 11-1, 12-0. So for me, those are the 3 interesting games, and we have to actually go to Oklahoma, which is going to be absolutely horrendous.
Well, it's at the Cotton Bowl, isn't it?
It is at the Cotton
It's
Bowl,
at the
yeah,
Cotton
but
Bowl.
it's theirs. They're sort of, they do have the favourable results at the Cotton Bowl over Texas. Not obviously, I'm not sure what the actual stats are, but I'm pretty sure they have the favour at the Cotton Bowl in terms of the stats. But yeah, that for me, if we can get through Oklahoma, if we can beat them, I think they're going to be probably. I think for them is going to be the struggle is the fact that I think they've got quite an easy run to start with, from what I remember, and then theirs is more back end. That's where their issues are after they play us. So both teams are coming off a bye for that game, and it's not until after that obviously they play Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU. So they could be right up for that. I mean, it's one of those sorts of games like we talk about in football where you have rivalries where form goes out the window. It's all about beating up your opponent and trying to win that rivalry game. And that's probably, the Red River Run game is probably one of the biggest I personally think it's one of the biggest rivalries in the country. So,
yeah,
but it is one of those that, that game could decide if we beat Georgia or not.
Yeah. You've got a nice, other than Michigan in Ann Arbor, which again, I did say last week on the podcast when we were talking about the Big 10, I think that Texas is a game that Michigan will lose. I think that Texas will come away with a win there. That's that could be very easily a 5-0 start heading into a bye week. And you've just walked into a brand new division. A brand new conference. You're 5-0 to start and had a week off. That's a good place to be to go to the Cotton Bowl and play Oklahoma. And with Georgia, we spoke again before. Momentum is a massive thing in every sport, but in this sport, I feel momentum just counts for that little bit more. With the lack of games, with every game counting for that bit more. Being 6-0. And relatively well rested going into playing Georgia. And if we go over to, by the time that game happens, if you go over to Georgia's schedule, they've had Clemson in that Vegas game.
Vegas kickoff game.
And I know what we said about Clemson last week, how it's probably a job in for Georgia. But you never know how close that game could end up being. Then they've got Tennessee Tech. Then they're at Kentucky. Bye week. Then they're at Alabama, Auburn.
That'll be an interesting game.
That will be interesting, the Alabama game.
Auburn and Mississippi State at home.
Auburn's not an easy game.
It's not an easy game. Mississippi State they should roll, but Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn's an interesting one. They have an interesting team, and And I mean, that stadium, the Auburn Stadium, I mean, no, it's not at Auburn, but that Auburn Stadium's absolutely fantastic to see.
Yeah.
But that could be it's probably one of those, it's a banana skin game. So what Nick would mention last week. If they don't turn up to that game, they could easily lose it.
Yeah.
But they should win it.
Oh yeah. And it's one of those things though where some of those games you just what you expect doesn't happen. And I'm not saying that Texas won't have those games and those games can't happen to Texas, but if we're looking from a point of view of Georgia here, those games can very easily happen in that running. And looking at it from the point of view of Texas, that if you can go 6-0, you would expect the Oklahoma game to be relatively close and to be a bit of a, to be a chippy game, potentially. You expect that, you're ready for it. Going 6-0, let's say Georgia walk in 5-1, you've got the momentum on your side.
Yeah. And it's at Texas, which again can play a big part.
Yeah, and I think I said it last week about the Oregon-Ohio State game, that both teams could walk to that with a equal record, if not one team might have a one-game better record. I think both teams would want to walk into that as if, like, this is our statement. Georgia wants to walk into that and say, you think Texas can do it? No chance. And let us show you why. Welcome to the SEC. And I think Texas walk into that game and go, you think Georgia, you don't think we're ready for the SEC and Georgia are better? No, thank you. Here we are in the SEC. Welcome to Texas.
I think the one thing that's worth pointing out as well is that if you look at, because obviously, and I don't want to, I mean, obviously we have a rivalry with the Sooners, and I don't want to diminish them as a team. I mean, they've over the years have been a very good team. They aren't as good as us, which is fine, and they never will be. But looking at their first 5 games as well, they could also be 5-0.
Yeah.
I think Tulane's not an easy game, but I think they could be 5-0. So you could have 2 teams coming off their bye weeks, because they have the bye week before us as well, going into that game 5-0, and then obviously that then could really have an impact on who wins that game in terms of the momentum shift within the division.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you mentioned that Auburn, though, and how for Georgia it's a banana skin game, and then but that one's Oklahoma have got that in Auburn.
that could be again. It's another one of those where it could be a potential loss, but I don't know. I just think it'll all, like you say, it's going to depend on going into that bye week, because I think there's a lot of teams that have the bye week that week. I know that obviously Georgia have it 2 weeks before, but a lot of teams have that game week 6 as their bye, and that could be that. I think that's going to be really important as to how teams do. I mean, even looking at like the likes of LSU, who also have a bye week that week, could be important for them. They could be, again, looking at their season. I think they're going to have a drop off, but looking at theirs, I think they've got a much harder, with USC and South Carolina. Because Auburn have the bye week. Oh no, they have the bye week afterwards. So yeah, I think it's. I don't want to place too much emphasis on the Oklahoma game in terms of how the season could play out, but I think it could be really important as a conference game as well as just being a rivalry game.
So that's a big 2 weeks for your season. That's a big 2 weeks.
Thing is, though, you look at the SEC schedule, you could say that there's big games almost every week. So going back to just how competitive this conference is, it's just like you look at it and you go, as you say, that rivalry weekend or the bye week weekend, that weekend where you're playing those guys, and then you look at who else is playing. It's like there's just so many games where you just go, oh, that's a big one. Oh, that's also a big one. Oh, that's a big one too. And as you say, LSU floating around there, never easy, and it can really upset the apple cart of a number of teams. So it's.
I think you can probably go through every single week and pick out at least one or two big games. I mean, even just looking at game week 1, Georgia versus Clemson,
Yeah.
LSU versus USC, and
Miami, Florida,
Texas A&M versus Notre Dame, which is going to be a huge game. So, that's just week 1, and then obviously you go into week 2. Texas Michigan will be a big game.
Yeah.
I mean,
probably. I'm trying to look at some of the other ones, but
I mean, are we really not going to shout out Tennessee versus the Chattanooga Moose? Are we really not going to throw them in the conversation? Are we fine if we want to throw disrespect to that game, but fine.
Vanderbilt versus Alcorn in week 2.
That was my one for week 2 to throw in there.
That's got to be game of the week on ESPN, surely.
Vanderbilt Alcorn, great game.
What a game!
If we have got any Vanderbilt fans or Alcorn fans listening, we're sorry.
We do apologise, but I can't imagine there's many of you out there.
No.
Yeah, it's one of those. I put the document and thing like that together for the episode, and it's like, okay, that's a team that exists. Okay, that's a team. Where on earth would they be from? I didn't care enough to actually Google where they're from. I'm not going to lie. But there are a few teams that end up in these that I'm just, especially in those first weeks 1, 2, and 3, where I'm just like, I'll never hear your name again.
Those teams, as I say, that they get picked up as whipping boy teams for some of the bigger, conference games.
Alcorn State University is in Mississippi.
There you go. Vanderbilt apparently is in Texas somewhere, isn't it? Or is it? No, Tennessee.
It was founded in 1871 and was the first black land grant college established in the United States.
Well, there you go. So it's a HBCU or whatever they were called. Was it historically black college?
Yeah.
Black HBCU? HBCU?
LGU or whatever. Public Historically Black Land Grant University.
There you
go. With that in mind, I know we mentioned Vanderbilt though. Their win total, I've got them at a 2.5 win total for the over/under. If you want to take a bet,
you gotta hope they get 3, right? You gotta take the over.
Mississippi State, I have on the over/under at 4.5. The same as the Florida Gators and the Arkansas Razorbacks.
You got to take I'm sorry, I'm taking the under on Florida. They are just going to get beaten up all season.
I reckon. Actually, yeah,
what do we think? Right. Here's a question.
I reckon you're right.
I suppose we actually haven't spoken about the other conference yet before we delve into that question I was about to ask. Who are we calling then? I'm calling it's a Georgia. I'm guessing, Sam, you're not.
No, I'm going Texas.
I would be mighty surprised if you didn't. Who are you calling for the SEC then, Fletch?
It's a great question. I am going to throw, just because of the trifecta that Georgia have going into the season and the familiarity with everything.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I think for me, I just can't. There's that. If I'm 95% on Texas, I'm just 97 on Georgia, that kind of thing. It could go either way. It will come down to that 2 weeks for Texas and that game between Texas and Georgia. But or at least, yeah. I look to Georgia right now. But actually looking even now though, just in case that matchup could end up resulting in, at the end of the day, they'll probably both make the championship game. And that
definitely
week 7
playoff games. They're definitely both in the playoffs as well.
And that game in week 8
to be honest, I think
the season won't matter too much.
And you look at it and you think it's extended college football playoff, and we know who's getting the dedicated ones, championship conference winners and whatever else. Got to assume that a fair proportion of the rest of the college football playoff teams are coming out of the SEC, right? I mean, I'm counting 4, 5 at least.
Yes.
Georgia and Texas, I think, are in.
I think Georgia, Texas,
See,
Bama, I think will be there. I know that obviously they don't have Nick Saban, but I still
I
think
think
they're
DeBoer's
still a good
he's
team.
decent. I think Ole Miss will be in there. I think they've done really well.
Tennessee, I think they could be in there, in with a shout.
Maybe. So yeah,
I think LSU are going to have a drop off. I'm not convinced that they're going to be as good as they were, but they obviously still have a great team.
Yeah, that's entirely fair.
Just before we go on to Big 12, I just wanted to just say, I've see with the last couple of conferences we've done, just picked out a few players to look at.
Yes.
So for the SEC, obviously I've mentioned Trey Moore, the edge at Texas. Obviously you can look at that. I didn't want to. I'll try not to go for too many obvious players in terms of the likes of Carson Beck and Treveon Henderson, etc. Quinn Ewers, all the ones that we expect to do well. I have picked out Trey Harris at Ole Miss. I think he's going to be a top wide receiver this year, as well as Luther Burden. I think he could have an interesting
Luther
season.
Burden the third at Missouri. Yeah.
And then my last one. And then my last one, which I like to try and do some defensive players. So my defensive player is I forget his first name, but it's Perkins, the linebacker at LSU. Let me just find his first name. His first name is Harold Perkins Jr., linebacker at LSU. One player to watch out for.
No problem. And believe it or not, I've been taking note of some of these players to watch, Sam. And I've got a little thing here in with my predictions, and I will try to do what I can. We'll put a couple of reminders out just before the season, and hopefully we'll keep a track on them of some of your players to watch. And then when it comes around to the draft, when all the players that you've chosen as players to watch go in the first round, we'll know that you're an absolute genius in what you're looking for.
Yes, you know everything. Yeah.
Or when none of them get drafted, we'll know that if Sam says they're a player to watch someone else. But obviously hoping for the other way around because we want to look like we know our stuff. Now let's get on to the main event in the Big 12, the greatest conference in the Big 12.
The greatest conference in the Big 12
is
the Big
greatest
12.
Conference in the Big 12 is the Big 12. However, this conference does feature the media frenzy of Colorado. So we have storylines. This conference will be exciting.
This conference will have plenty of media visibility. It will have lots of coverage. It will be all over the place. They have a number of players there that are going to be interesting. I don't think the Buffaloes are going to be troubling the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, they started off reasonably well last year. I think they went 3-0, but they were beating up on flat track bullies, I think, on some teams, and then they came up short for. I think they then lost 8 in a row or something like that. So I don't see them getting anywhere close, but they'll certainly be entertaining.
In this document that I have so lovingly prepared for you, gents, I did put in last season's records, including the overall record and their conference record. They went for an 8 overall, but went 1-8 in the division. 3 of those 4 wins came out of conference, and I believe those 3 were some of those starter games that.
Yep.
Not all 3 of those are necessarily at the level of a Power 4 school.
No.
Obviously did not make a bowl game with the record either. No. Do you at least think, because Mr. Sanders has heavily emphasised his usage of the transfer portal, and they have heavy transfer portal classes, can that translate into wins? Now, I speak about the over-unders. Last year, they won 4. This year's over-under for them, as correlated by 3 or 4 different sources, is 5.5. So, start with, are you taking the over or under on that?
I'd probably be willing to take the over. I think that they could sneak that. I could see them doing a 6-6.
Yeah, I think I can see them being bowl eligible. Just which, considering when Sanders took over there 2 years ago, they were rock bottom, 2 wins or whatever else. It's still showing progress.
Yeah.
Even in the face of, as you just mentioned, the trifecta of continuity, having the same head coach, having the same QB and same OC, he's kind of gone in and gone, just get me the best players out of the transfer portal, shake it all up and get a new team almost every year up to this point. That can't obviously continue because the likelihood is at the end of this year he loses 2 of his best players anyway, because they're going to go in the draft. Then where does he go?
Sanders is definitely going to go, isn't he?
Sanders is going, and Hunter's definitely going. Wherever, he's going to be one of those. Did he get drafted as a cornerback? Did he get drafted as a wide receiver? Whatever team gets him, they've got a real star. So it'll be interesting to see even if Deion is still at Colorado, or if he kind of goes, right, son's gone to the NFL. It's not like he needs the money. It's not like he needs the job, is it? So, it will be interesting to see what happens after this season. Does he stick with Colorado? Does he go somewhere else? Because he's only been there a couple of seasons, So, has he made a big enough name for himself to get a bigger job somewhere? I guess depends on their record. If they do make a bowl, I think he's got a good shout, and the likelihood is he'll go somewhere else.
I think if they somehow make a bowl, he will go. He will be drafted. He'll probably go as like an OC in the NFL somewhere. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Just again for that name purpose more than anything.
Depending on where the QB gets drafted, I guess it would be interesting to see.
Do you think he goes to somewhere in the NFL that's, if you talk about being a name, is he going to a place where, similar to defenses under Bill Belichick and offenses under Andy Reid, let's face it, you might be the coordinator, but you aren't really coordinating anything. You're there as a name.
Yeah.
You're there to hold the position
Atlanta?
because...
I can't see him going to Atlanta with Raheem Morris. If Raheem Morris is still in charge, he will not go to Atlanta because they won't want to upset the apple cart there.
No, after new season, first season stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean they brought in the Rams QB coach as their OC, and he has got shining reviews. So unless he moves on to maybe go to like
a bigger job,
then potentially. But I think Atlanta's probably one of those that they probably wouldn't think to go near it.
But I'm just thinking, he obviously played there and everything else. The link is there, isn't it? But
he has Raiders linked. He has Raiders all over him.
That sort of like
flary sort of,
loud, brash, in your face.
Ridiculous money.
Ridiculous money. Throw money at it. I mean, it does have Raiders all over it. Depending on where the Raiders finish and where they draft and whatnot. And, Sanders at the Raiders wearing black and silver is not beyond the realms of possibility there at all.
And I mean, the Raiders could be looking at a very bad season if Minshew and O'Connell don't work out, which means that, they could
in the
easily be
market
looking
for a QB. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a shock for me.
With that in mind,
Colorado. We might as well
Colorado.
talk about some of the teams that might win this division at some point. I think this is actually epitomizing what the Big 12 conversation is going to be about this season. It's all going to be about Colorado, even though they're not going to be that good.
Let's go on the football though. Let's go on their football to start to kind of keep moving the conversation along. North Dakota State, then they're at Nebraska, then they're at Colorado State, Baylor at UCF, bye week, Kansas State at Arizona, Cincinnati, bye week, at Texas Tech, Utah, at Kansas, Oklahoma State.
Those final 3 games are an absolute bitch.
That's a bitch of a close. I was going to look at that and thinking that's 3 losses at the end there, isn't it? It's a tough end of schedule, so going into
probably
they need to get the points. Yeah, they lose those.
you lose those three. Texas Tech. What do you reckon?
50-50, I think.
It's a
with that.
toss-up depending on. Is it at Texas Tech, you say, or is it at home?
It is
Yeah, at Texas Tech.
Yeah. Favour Texas Tech there.
I mean,
But
I've not.
Yeah.
I would favour them, yeah, but I've not exactly got Texas Tech down as lighting up the conference at this moment
No.
in time.
No.
Kansas,
I mean, before
Arizona, and
that-
Cincinnati in between the bye weeks.
Kansas, they'll lose.
Yeah.
Arizona, I think they'd lose.
At Arizona as well.
Arizona or Arizona
At
State,
Arizona.
just to give that.
Arizona. At
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah, they lose that. Yeah, they lose it. Probably beat
And then-
Cincinnati.
Yeah, I could see them beating Cincy.
So let's see. You're looking at those last 7 games. I've heard you say they'll win one. They'll win one. 2 of them kind of up in the air, but you would not favour them.
I mean, I would only have them winning against Cincinnati. I think they'd lose Arizona. I think Texas Tech they could beat. So I think there's one definite, one maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
again,
then before that, you've got UCF, which
Who knows?
is
what
a
that's gonna-
maybe.
Maybe. Who knows what UCF turn out?
Baylor, I think they'll beat Baylor.
Yeah.
Colorado State should beat them.
They
I'd
should
take that
roll.
as a win.
Although didn't they lost against them last year though, didn't they? Because it mouthed off against them or something like that. Different one.
Nope.
Can't remember, but it.
Nebraska, Dylan Raiola is going to absolutely destroy them.
Yes.
mm-hmm. I'm sure.
And then North Dakota State they'll win. So I think there's 1, 2,
That's
3,
4.
4 wins with 2 potentials.
Yeah.
So let's
Four
give them the
with
benefit
2
of the doubt.
on the.
Let's
Mm.
let's get splinters in our backsides and sit on the fence on this one. We'll give them 1, take 1 off them. Out of those 2, that's 5. It's no bowl game. That's 1 win better than last season.
It's an improvement.
It
is an improvement, but is it enough of an improvement considering the brashness and noise and everything else?
I think the problem is because of the fact that team is so completely different, we have no idea how they're going to look. And that's the big problem is they could come out and they could blow away teams. Probably not the last 3 that we've mentioned, but that Texas Tech game, they could blow them away.
Yeah.
UCF, they could blow them away. Nebraska, they could potentially win. So, I mean, you could be looking at actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
7.
6, 7 wins.
Yeah.
Which then puts them in a picture. So.
Yeah, it's just it is as you say, it's the unknown quantity of hey, we've changed pretty much 2/3 of our team. Who knows what's going to turn up week 1 and 2? But they could come out flying. It could all click, or it could just be like 11 guys playing football who've never played a game before together. It could be really hit and miss.
tied
it
with
makes
them.
it fun.
Yeah, tied with them in my over-under projections is the Arizona State Sun Devils. The only team we have as lower in the pecking order is the Houston Cougars. But, as we mentioned, let's go look at the other side of the conference. 2 favourites at this moment in time with 9.5 over-unders is the Utah Utes and the Kansas State Wildcats, with Arizona Wildcats, Kansas Jayhawks, and the Oklahoma State Cowboys all reckoning with 8 wins in the over-under. How would you feel about those, Gary?
I know it's an interesting one. There's some ins and outs. I think Utah probably are the strongest and probably should be favourite for the conference. But I think it's between Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State as as we've mentioned against the SEC. It's kind of a toss-up who gets on top of that one. But I think it's definitely between those 3. I think Kansas probably have a better schedule, so they might actually have slightly easier run to the total game than the
Mhm.
other two, so I just don't think Kansas State will. I think they'll just tail off towards the end. So I
Yeah.
do think it'll be between the Utes, Kansas, and Oklahoma State, with the Utes just having enough experience of being in and around there. I think is what will get them
Yeah.
over the edge.
I mean, well, Kansas State have Arizona State, Cincinnati, and they're at Iowa State to end the season with the bye just before the Arizona State game. They have one of the lucky Week 11 buys, or Week 11, well, Week 11 or later buys, because there are a
Week 11,
couple
get ready,
with a
and
bye
then
in Week 12.
and potentially then roll those last 3 games, because that doesn't sound massively
But
struggles.
But in the previous 4 games, they've got just before that bye week, because they've also got the Week 6 bye. They're at Colorado. They're getting taken home to West Virginia. They've got Kansas at home, and then they're in Houston as well. So Houston, by all accounts, though that's a win for them on the road or not. Kansas at home will be I'm making sure. Yeah, Kansas at home should be
That'll be one
a
to
close
watch,
one at
wouldn't
best.
it? Oh, yeah, that will be a one to watch, that game.
One thing I want to do throughout the season is put out a couple of those. In each conference, there'll be a game or two to watch, like we spoke about with the SEC. That would be, that'd be in
That one.
in one for the
Yeah,
Big
that
12.
one I would call that one as the one to watch. Yeah.
At West Virginia and at Colorado in the 2 weeks before that. Now, as we've said, Colorado, we would have expected Kansas State to take that, but again, you can't fully understand where Colorado are at, and we'll know probably a couple of weeks before that what to truly expect from Colorado.
Yeah.
But West
So they
Virginia...
could, that's a weird one. The West Virginia one, I reckon they'll probably win that one.
West Virginia are pretty... I think I've got them... Personally, I've got them going under the 6.5, but, they are consistently considered a pretty average run-of-the-mill in the Big 12, so I'd be happy to take Kansas State over them. So...
Yeah. I do see them being... Yeah, that's a favourable... Overarchingly, it's favourable. So, the Wildcats could just sneak in there.
But I think only the West Virginia one seems like it will be a pretty much right. Okay, you're probably going to win that one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the Houston one. Sorry, West Virginia you're probably going to win it, but
they should win that one.
But
it's not a walk in the park.
Banana peel.
Yeah.
Could end up being a banana peel. Colorado, we just don't know. But right now we'd expect. Right now you don't know. Kansas. It's it comes down to one of those that we keep mentioning. But I mean, it could be. But you're also talking that's a rivalry game. That's an interstate game. That's just a couple more things ride there that week, and one of the benefits, I guess, as well, of being at home for that one.
Yeah, which might just give them the edge. Yeah.
And then you look at Kansas, though, who they start off with what a great start to an incredible school in Lindenwood. Then they're at Illinois. Then they have UNLV at home. Then they're being taken home to West Virginia. Then they've got TCU. Then they're at Arizona State. Then a bye week, Houston and Kansas State. Away to Kansas State. That's a nice couple of weeks beforehand.
They could be unbeaten before they get to Kansas State, couldn't they? TCU maybe, depending on if the Horned Frogs get back to what they were like a couple of seasons ago, but they tailed off dramatically last year, so I don't know who they're going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kansas could be rolling into Kansas State unbeaten at that point, so could be. I mean, to me, that game is the game of this conference.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a rivalry. It's an interstate or interstate rival, whatever it is. But it's also in conference. It just looks like the game of the conference.
So all eyes on the state of Kansas in week.
Plus,
It's
the
too far over,
Jayhawks
I'm
have
sure.
one of potentially the best helmet logos out of
Week
any
9.
conference.
Oh, they're great, aren't they? Absolutely fantastic. Look,
I think I'm leaning Kansas.
Fuck on, leg on.
That would be my call on this one. I think Kansas sneak in just because they're scheduled and they've started off really well and they've got that momentum. I see Kansas it's a toughie. Utah or Kansas, that's the toss. Yeah. Depends on a toss of the coin. I say Kansas because of their schedule. But I think Utah are probably the strongest team.
Well, if you are watching on YouTube, then you will probably noticed over the last couple of minutes Sam has been jumping back in and out again. If you have been listening, you will notice that Sam hasn't really weighed in on this discussion, which is very unfortunate. Being wary of the time that we're at now, knowing that I've got a 2-hour drive ahead of me with a 7-year-old girl who wants to watch archery at 8 in the morning in the car, is going to be a fantastic one. And I'm all for it, by the way. I'd love to watch some archery in the morning.
Lean into it, mate. Lean into archery. Just, you can't watch
it. So, being aware of that, and with Sam having a couple of tech issues, don't really want to run too far away from him there. So I think this is going to be a point where I'm going to ask you now, Gary. I know you basically just said it, but I have to ask for an official. Let's put it down on paper. Can you please call for me the Big 12?
Okay. The title game will be between the Kansas Jayhawks and the Utah Utes, with the Jayhawks taking the Big 12.
And is that because of Foghorn Leghorn, or is that genuinely football?
That's just because of I said what?
I'm fine with the reasoning. I see no flaw with the logic at all. By the way,
it's just that's it. Yeah.
So let me get over here. So I am going to go. In fact, I'm with you. I will go with Kansas for the fact that, and again, I think it's going to be one of those. No, I don't want to take Utah out of the conversation, but when you are looking at that Week 9 matchup, I think that could be how that goes. And if you've got a 6-0 Kansas going into that game, and they come away from that 7-0, I think that sets a bad precedent for kind of. Then they go into a bye week again with Iowa at BYU, Colorado at home, and then at Baylor. I think that could be a bad precedent to set because they could run away with it a little bit. So I will also sit with you on the Kansas fence there. Unfortunately, Sam hasn't been able to jump back in. Obviously, we're missing Nick. And hopefully next week we'll have a debut from our brand new guest.
Brand new guest? A brand new co-host?
Brand new co-host, sorry. My absolute apologies.
Don't undersell him. He's not even got here and you're already underselling him.
I can't undersell him because he's a Michigan fan. So I'm not underselling anyone who's a Michigan.
No.
Oh, hang on. Before we go. So Sam has graciously sent through via internet communications on another device. I have Sam's players to watch this year from the Big 12, which will be again, we'll kind of put these out a bit closer to the time. Avery Johnson, QB, Kansas State, believed to be a Heisman contender. Could have come with some pronunciations there, Sam, thank you. Dylan Woodke. It's Wudke. I don't know how to pronounce that one. Thanks, Sam. A defensive lineman from Kansas. Caleb Alarms, or a linebacker from TCU. And finally, by the way, this guy is a bloody cheat code when you play with him. on College Football 25. I'm pretty sure you know where I'm getting at here already. If you played it, that'd be Ollie Gordon, the second, or running back from Oklahoma State.
Just
Cheat code.
filthy on college football.
So, there we go. There are Sam's players to watch. Again, we'll drop them a bit closer to the time. Gary, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your week. And hopefully we'll see you next week.
Have fun in Wales, buddy.
Let me have a quick look here. Just to wrap it up, what we've got planned for next week. Yep. Next week, we're going to be looking at the playoffs / the top 25. Maybe giving a look into kind of seeing where some of our predictions lie, because we all disagree on some of the conferences, which means we'll disagree on who will get into the top 25 in the playoffs. So next week, with the debut of our brand new co-host, college football playoffs and the top 25. Gary, have a lovely week, and Sam, you too. By the way,
Take it easy, mate.